I worked the night shifts at an isolated McDonald's drive-thru, and I was given a list of rules to follow. During the summer break of my junior year of high school, I worked as a McDonald's employee. I was 17 and pretty naive at the time. I desperately needed money to add to my college fund. My parents did not plan it out so well, so there was a high chance I wouldn't go to college if I didn't get a job. I was mostly busy during the whole day. I was a day person and wasn't very productive at night. During the day, I was either hanging out with friends, working out, studying, or learning and practicing for coding competitions to add to my portfolio. Usually at night, I wasn't doing anything. The most productive thing at night was just some plain old written homework. Because of the reasons mentioned above, and because I did not sleep a lot at night, approximately about 3 to 4 hours, I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and take a night shift job. That way I could get paid for doing absolutely zero mental work and get my homework done. I applied at a lot of places, but I have to admit, I was a big fan of fast food, so fast food jobs were at the top of my priority list. So when I got a job at a McDonald's, it was a no-brainer for me. The McDonald's was located a bit on the outskirts of town, probably for travelers, but I didn't mind as long as was getting paid, and it being isolated also meant there would be comparatively fewer customers, so I might even get a chance to squeeze in another hour of sleep. I got into my dad's car and went to the store. It looked pretty dreary. The outside walls had a bit of mold on them. I entered the small building to be greeted by a middle-aged man standing behind the counter. He greeted me with a smile and a nod of acknowledgement. He took me to the drive-thru booth where I would be receiving orders and explained how everything worked: the ice cream machines, the soft drink dispensers, and the fryers. After he had given me a quick tour of the building, he brought me back to the counter, took a deep breath, and said, "Hey kid, do you believe in ghosts and stuff?" "No, but why do you ask?" I inquired. "I know I am gonna sound insane for this, but you'll have to follow some rules while working here." Now, I know all of them sound unbelievable, but trust me, they are as real as it gets. They could even cost you your life. I looked at him, puzzled. "What are the rules?" "And has anyone been hurt or something?" I said. He pulled out his phone. He had multiple photos of teenagers who formerly worked here, but ignored the rules and have gone missing since. "Why don't you go to the cops?" I asked him interrogatively. "Because no one believes me," he said, his voice getting shaky. "They conduct a full area search. They think I am insane." He almost burst into tears, but composed himself and begged me to follow the rules and take them seriously. I said that I would, and his face lit up. He handed me the list of rules, thanked me, and left. I reluctantly smoothed out the piece of paper and started reading. List of rules for to survive a night. Rule 1. Keep the lights on the drive-thru counter, where you'll hand the customer the food at all times, with an exception to Rule 5. There is a creature just lurking nearby, waiting for the lights to go out and letting your guard down. Rule 2. There are security cameras next to the counter table. Always check who is in the drive. If the person ordering is in a black Range Rover Evoque with tinted windows, do not speak a word to him. He will stop bothering you if you ignore his angry threats and drive away in a few minutes. If you speak to him, however, he is going to break into your booth and attack you like a wild animal. God knows what entity he is that can mimic a human voice so perfectly. Rule 3. If someone orders fries, tell them you're all out, because you do not want to open a bag of frozen fries at midnight. Trust me. The scent will attract unwanted attention, and it'll end well for no one. Rule 4. If you hear your name being called from behind you, stop everything you're doing, lay down, and close your eyes. You might feel teeth on your limbs, or giant talons rubbing against your head or torso, but please do not move. It'll be gone after you hear demonic giggling. Rule 5. If you see a 5-year-old girl with no eyes, standing in the driveway looking directly at the camera, locking all the doors and windows, and closing all the lights, you might hear screaming, roaring, and screeching from the outside. Once it has been a minute since the sounds have ceased, turn the lights back on and continue with your job. Rule 6. If you hear people in the main dining area, do not check that out. No one is there, since the place will be locked. It's just another distraction by the creature lurking nearby. Rule 7. If the lights go out by themselves, chop off a toe or a finger, place it on the drive-thru counter, and duck behind it. You'll hear low growls, followed by a quick snatching sound. Get up once the lights are back and check the counter. If your finger/toe is missing, congratulations, you're gonna live to see another day. If the finger/toe is still there, just pray to God it kills you quickly and doesn't take its time cherishing your screams. Rule 8. It is advised you do not sleep because then you can miss your name being called, or the 5-year-old girl, or the laughing and talking sounds of people in the dining area, which can cost you your life. I was puzzled. If this was a joke, it was a terrible one, I thought to myself, just before noticing movement in one of the bushes in the drive-thru. Do you know how you think you can be brave and fight through fear during a fight or flight situation? Well, nope, your body seizes up when facing the fear head-on without a warning. Somewhere in my heart, I believed that this list was fake or an elaborate prank, but I didn't want to take any chances. So I decided to comply with the rules. For the first hour of the night, literally nothing paranormal happened. I didn't even get a customer till then. This will be easy. I sighed and thought to myself. Flipping through the cameras every 20 minutes, I almost didn't notice the little girl peeking through a bush. Her eye sockets were devoid of eyes. I looked at them, and they seemed void of any human emotion. They were evil in a way. The more I looked in them, the more I wanted to cry. I was so fixated that I almost forgot to switch the lights off, but remembered Rule 5. I got under the counter after switching off the lights, and I heard something slam against the left wall of the booth, like something big had lashed out and tried to break through the wall. Then I heard quick footsteps, followed by the cries of a little girl. The cries kept on increasing in intensity, to the point where I thought I would go deaf. I covered my ears, but could still hear her cries. The cries ceased within 30 seconds, and I heard a low growl. The growl was followed by the sounds of roaring and slashing of meat. The sounds were so disgusting that I threw up all over the floor. After collecting myself mentally, then getting up and turning the lights back on, I cleaned the puke and contemplated what I had just been through. Before I was even finished thinking about this, I heard people talking, but the noise was very distant. I couldn't make out any words, just laughs, giggles, and overlapping voices. The night was eerily silent, so I could hear every little thing that went bump in the night. I was just about to go check it out when I remembered some rules regarding this specific event. I reread the list and found it. It was Rule 6. I had to just ignore it and it'd go away, and so I did. I put on my earphones and started with some school work. Almost 1 hour passed, and nothing happened when finally a customer came through the drive-thru. I served them, and was happy that people were starting to come now. I saw another car pulling up. I was really happy now. I wasn't alone in this hellhole any longer. My good mood was immediately put off when I saw it was a black Range Rover with tinted windows. I didn't speak to the angry man on the other side. He screamed his order, then said, "I know you're in there. Are you deaf?" Motherfucker. I didn't reply and kept my cool. 10 minutes later, it was gone. My shift is over. Now I am sitting here typing this, contemplating if this job is worth $200 a day or not. I wanted to quit, but the guy begged me not to, and that he would double my pay since I was so good at it, but I didn't want to risk my life again. Why I stopped working at McDonald's. I can't believe it. A full 13 years of my life in a school system that has caused me nothing but stress and anxiety, for years of my life wasting my resources and money at community college, and all it's landed me is a shit job at McDonald's. You know there's something wrong with American education when you dedicate your entire youth to a system that you were forced into, and all it gets you is a minimum wage job at some fast food place. While I may be venting about my personal life, I am not writing this as a means of coping with my suppressed anger. This is something that has been slowly ruining my life to the point where I am even scared to leave my own house. To start, I've been working at this job for about 6 months now. I am a male in my mid-20s, and I have had a long history of meeting weirdos and creeps, but this one certainly takes the cake. Ever since I started working here, there was this guy, we'll call him Joe, fake name. He was a middle-aged man who had glasses and combs over with blindingly white skin. I would rarely see him talking. I don't think I had ever seen him converse with any of the work staff on a conversational level when I started working there. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe this guy is an introvert, or maybe he has some social disorders and he just prefers to stay quiet. But let me tell you, actions speak louder than words, my friends, and what this guy has done to me, to my colleges, will haunt us for the rest of our lives. The only time I saw him express some real emotion was when he left his phone on the counter. I picked it up just to see what sort of background this guy had, seeing as he was so strange. He immediately came back and snatched it out of my hands. "Do not ever touch my phone," he screamed at me. That was the very time I had ever heard him yell, and all the time I had been working there. One day Joe came into work with an entirely different persona. He had been proposing we start doing all these new things with the McDonald's. All of them were either disturbing, creepy, or just flat out disgusting. One of his proposals was that he start dressing up like Ronald McDonald and having tickle fights with the kids. I don't know if I stated this already, but this guy is in his fucking 40s and he's acting like it's completely normal. I passed it off as I thought he was just trying to make me laugh with some sort of awkward humor that only someone like him could muster. One of the other coworkers, Maya, had told me that he said that he thought it would be funny if he started hiding in people's cars and surprising them with free Happy Meals, said that it would bring people back to McDonald's more often. In the coming weeks, he would start asking us more personal questions like what we think the age of consent should be and what we think happens after we die. He told us that he believed that there were slaves in the afterlife and that people like Hitler would have the most slaves because he killed the most people. This guy was just getting creepier by the day. Last week we found a hidden camera in the women's restroom ventilation. We checked to see who put it in there, but we couldn't make out a face, and it had to be one of the staff members because all we could see was a uniform. My manager immediately started accusing people of it, mainly the guys, which was me, these two other guys, and Joe. Joe remained silent like he always did and just awkwardly looked around the place while talking, so my manager assumed it couldn't have been him. Finally, one day Joe had said he was going outside to smoke, and he had left his phone in the back of the McDonald's. Maya and I had been trying to guess the password, and miraculously we opened it by it being 4, 3, 2, 1. This guy was not very clever. As we scrolled through his camera roll, we discovered a couple of pictures of kids on his phone. Maya had told me that she didn't know Joe had kids, but as we continuously scrolled through his camera roll, we saw that there were provocative pictures of kids from all ages taken inside the McDonald's. We immediately showed our manager and we waited for him to come back inside. When he came back, my manager tore him a new one and said that she would be contacting the police. He immediately glared at Maya and me and he muttered softly, "Yo, you went through my phone?" After that, He started walking towards us, and we immediately got the fuck out of there and waited for the police. They arrested him, and we haven't seen him since. Now, this is where it's been getting fucking strange. A month had gone by, and Maya and I had been getting close. We started going out, and in some strange way the incident had made us bond more and had led us to start seeing each other. Life seems to work in very odd ways. One night we went out and we went to the movies for a date. It wasn't until midway through the movie that someone with a comb-over haircut and glasses got up from his seat and exited the theater. Maya looked at me and asked if I had seen that guy. I nodded my head, and we both just spent the rest of the movie wondering if it had been Joe. As we were going back to my car, I looked inside my window to find that there was a Happy Meal just lying in my car seat. Now, the last thing I would ever bring on a date is a Happy Meal, and it had not been there before. But what freaked me out was whoever put it there must have gotten it no more than half an hour prior, because it was too hot for it to have been sitting there for a substantial amount of time. We looked through it and was a standard Happy Meal, and nothing was out of the ordinary. I realized that if that was indeed Joe we saw in the theater, that would mean he must have been watching us and even knew which car was mine and had put it there. I immediately threw it out, and we left to go back home. It was one Sunday afternoon when Maya texted me a very odd message that broke my heart. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but we need to break up. I have been seeing another guy, and unfortunately, we can't see each other anymore. Don't take this the wrong way. You're a very likable guy. I am asking you, please don't hate me for this. I hope in the end, we can still be friends. I completely lost my shit. What the fuck? What did I even do for this to happen to me? I called her, and she didn't pick up. I Snapchatted with her, and she never opened it. I called her damn house phone, and she didn't respond. This had to be a joke or a prank or something. Then I realized that every letter in that text that was capitalized spelled something. Have each likable please me, and I immediately took my car and drove over to her house as fast as I could. I rang her doorbell multiple times, and no one answered. Her car was gone, and I went through her back door, and no one was in the house. I called the police, and there was a full investigation. She was gone. I couldn't believe it. I told the police of everything that had happened, and they are still looking for her. I have been crying every night since then. This was all my fault. Joe had taken her all because I thought it would have been funny to go through his phone. The only good thing to happen to me in the last 10 years of my life was gone. It's been a month, and I still haven't recovered. Maya has still not been found, and I have become a raging alcoholic because of it. It wasn't until yesterday morning when I was taking the order through the drive-through speakers that someone on the other end just didn't talk. "Hello?" I had asked. Then the person on the other end started screaming. It wasn't until I kept listening that I realized it was Maya's voice. She was crying in agony. "Please don't kill me, please." Then the screaming got more intense. I nearly vomited. Finally, the screaming stopped, and I realized it had to have been a video that the person was putting against the microphone. The final words the man spoke into the mic was, "I told you not to go through my phone." I used to work at McDonald's. I used to work at a middle-of-nowhere McDonald's just outside of Port Richmond, Virginia. Spooky, right? But a few months ago, something terrible happened to one of the staff that for some reason justified erasing the place off the map. Not to say I'm sad to see the place gone. Now, the thing about fast food is that it attracts two kinds of people. Poor, but intelligent people who are working towards a bigger picture, and total losers who have given up hope. I belong to the latter group, but Grace, man, she was the queen of the former. When we both started together about 8 months ago, I knew straight away this girl was so far out of my league. She was so cool and down to earth and beautiful. She had this way of just accepting people and finding a way to admire them, no matter the person. It didn't matter that she was beautiful, educated, and better than me in every way. When you're the standard suburban moms set their kids not to be, you don't come across that kind of acceptance every day, you know? After months of working together, yeah, we got close. Not what you're thinking. So, it must have been mid-June or something, and we'd both been working the drive-thru together for a couple of weeks. When you spend a large portion of your life serving even larger assholes from a tiny window, you get familiar with the view. From my box you could see the grass hill that separated the drive-thru from the road, said road, and beyond that a Walmart parking lot. I spent so much time staring out of that window, I even started to recognize the cars that drove by, but after my first few weeks, there was one, in particular, I started to look out for. I thought it must have been the ex-con jitters, or growing up where I did, but I started to get a really bad feeling about this car as the days went by. It was an old Ford truck, one of the 87 F-150 models. Once upon a time, it would have been a real beauty, all bright reds with a white stripe down the middle. Now the red body of the truck was rusted beyond recognition, and the white stripe was a sickly yellow, like rotting teeth. The windows of the truck were the only things that survived the past 20 years unscathed, as they weren't standard. The whole truck was so heavily tinted I couldn't understand how the thing was still on the road. The cops are eager around here, or maybe that's just my experience. Anyway, the first time I see the truck, it's just parked in the lot across the road opposite. Nothing unusual about that, other than the pedophile chic look. It was just a car in a lot. Probably. The next day from my booth overlooking the drive, I see the car again. And again. And again. I saw it maybe 30 or 40 times that day. I think it was just driving in circles for some reason. Suffice it to say, at this point, I'm starting to get suspicious of this truck. It was looking quiet that night, but the manager was always up my ass if I left my post, so I gave Grace a quick text and asked her to watch the window for me while I went for a piss. When I came back, I asked her about the car and she got damn quiet, said that a couple of minutes after I left she saw the car come down the road and hit the brakes for apparently no reason. She said it stayed there just doing nothing on an empty road, that it felt like whoever was in there was looking at her. I guess it freaked her out when I told her I'd seen it around as well, because she went back to work and then went home before her shift finished. It was the first time I'd seen her anything less than offensively happy. The next day Grace didn't show up, so I covered her drive-through shift. There was a big queue that evening, so instead of looking out for the truck, I was focused on working through the white trash piling up along the drive-through. So focused that I didn't notice the truck when it came to the window. No one had taken any orders from the driver. So far as I could see, it had just driven up out of nowhere. So the truck stops at my window, and when I finally notice it, I can't even fucking breath. My eyes are locked on the tar black window, straining for a sight of the driver, but I can't see shit. I just get this feeling like I'm staring down a barrel of crude oil and it's something staring right back at me. I don't know what else to do, so I'm just having a staring contest with this window. Then as suddenly as it appeared, the car races off. Tires screeching, it plows over the grass across the wrong lane and races off into the night. I try to tell the manager, but of course, He just tells me to get a grip and deal with my shit. What an asshole. The next day, Grace came back to work and she seemed back to her old self. I was still reeling from last night, and when I told her what had happened, we were both pretty spooked. After a quick smoke, we both agreed that it was probably just some creep playing a joke on us, but we'd both keep an eye just in case. I saw it only briefly that night. It was driving slowly down the road beyond the hill. Its lights were off, so I could only see the truck by the lights of the cars behind. Behind it, the traffic was building up and you could hear the horns blaring, followed by curses that were cut short as people got close enough to see the windows. Before long, the truck raced off again, apparently done for the evening. When the time came for my regular nature break, Grace was happy to take my spot again. That was the last time I saw her. I must have been gone 2 minutes at the most, but by the time I had returned to the window, Grace was gone and the sound of screeching tires pierced the night. I ran back into the back and called the police, told the manager what I thought had happened, and pushed my way into the office to look at the security tapes. The manager was busy hollering about regulations beyond the door, but I didn't give a shit. As I turned on the computer and set up the tape, I saw what had happened. The cameras had picked up everything. On the screen, it played out like a bad horror short. The truck had rolled up out of nowhere as soon as I had gone, and with the lights off, Grace had seen it too late. She tried her best to get out of there, but before she could get out, and I can't believe I'm fucking saying this, something came bursting out from inside the truck. 2 long black arms, so thin and sinewy they seemed more like dead branches than limbs, thrust from the darkness where the driver's window should be and wrapped themselves around Grace's mouth and torso. To reach that far, they must have been 6 feet long at least. It was over in about 2 seconds. Grace was pulled head first from the drive-thru into the window that never fucking opened, and that was that. The police closed the whole joint after they took my statement. All of us, management included, got let go so fast they had to pay us unemployment. We've been looking for her ever since. It's been 6 months now, and it turns out Grace's family are incredibly awesome people. One of her uncles has even taken me on as an apprentice mechanic. No more MC assholes for me. It turned out that one of my friend's dads, Justin, was working the case. The guy hates me, but Justin finally managed to plow him for information. Today, after we met up and spoke about it, I'm convinced what happened in that booth was even more sinister than I first imagined. The police haven't turned up anything. Turns out the plate number I gave them for the truck belongs to a car on the other side of the country. They never even managed to see the damn thing on any other cameras around the area, and they've checked them all. It's like the car picked her up, blasted out of the drive-thru, and just vanished. Well, there was one tape they didn't get to look at more than briefly. According to Justin, his dad told him his whole department was up in arms because a couple of suits came in and confiscated the original tape maybe 2 days after the kidnapping. Told the whole force to drop the case and leave it to the feds. No one believes me, not even Grace's family. Even the cops who saw the tape are keeping quiet for some reason. But I'm not crazy. I saw that window, and I know that whatever took Grace from the booth that day wasn't anything natural. These days, I'm always looking at the road, and even when I'm working in the garage, I've got an eye out on the horizon, waiting for a car with tar black windows. I work at a small-town McDonald's. My manager makes us follow a strange set of rules. I'll have a number 4 meal with extra cheese, 2 Big Macs with a large fry, 3 apple pies, and a shamrock shake. All right, Stan, your total comes out to $46.50. The land whale grunted approvingly as he shoved a greasy wad of crumpled bills into Gary's outstretched palm. Here's your change. I'll call your number when it's ready. Stan trundled away to await his late-night snack as Gary and I prepared the food. Geez, man. Does he have a family waiting at home or something? I whispered as Gary shoveled fries into a red and yellow box. Blair, does that man look like he's got a wife and kids? Stan is one of our regulars. You'll see him pretty often if you stick with the night shift. I grimaced as I prepared the shake. Great. Lucky me. Hey, it could be a lot worse. Honestly, Stan is the least of your worries, he said as a shudder rippled through his body. We processed the remainder of the food in silence. Gary and I then shuffled to the counter, each donning a full tray. Stan, orders up. Gary exclaimed as the boulder of a man darted at an alarming speed to retrieve his sodium-rich smorgasbord. He snatched the trays from us, hurriedly ambling back to his corner table. I watched in astonishment as the man inhaled his meal. Hey, could you help me sweep in the back? Best to do it now before any more customers dash. Gary was interrupted by an obnoxiously loud alarm blaring from his pocket. Stan looked up at him, glowering at the unwelcome ringing. Sorry. Gotta take this, he said, darting to the kitchen and out of view. He returned a moment later. All the color had drained from his face. He appeared sickly as he'd suddenly caught a nasty case of the flu. That was my aunt, Norma. She said my parents were in a car wreck. My mom is in critical condition. He stared off into space, his brain slowly processing the tragic information it had just received. Gary, I'm so sorry. Do you need me to call someone? He snapped out of his trance, tears brimming in the corners of his eyes. He quickly wiped them away. No, I'll be fine. Okay. But with all due respect, what are you still doing here? Go be with your family, dude. I can handle closing up on my own. He locked eyes with me, a stern determination creeping over his countenance. You're right. I need to go. Here, take my key to the restaurant. There's a list of rules in Dave's office. Go read them the first chance you get. You need to follow them to a T, no matter how ridiculous they sound. Got it? Yep, I'll take care of it. Now go. I said as Gary handed me a small silver object. He sprinted out the front door, letting it slam shut behind him. I fashioned Gary's drive-through headset below my hat and headed to the back to familiarize myself with the nighttime protocols. I laboriously pushed open the door to Dave's office. You'd think that thing was made from solid gold with how heavy it was. I surveyed my surroundings, my eyes immediately falling on the life-sized portrait beaming back at me. Dave? Even I'm not that self-absorbed, I muttered, continuing my search. I defaulted to the pockmarked bulletin board to my right. There they were, posted clear as day. I swiftly scanned over them. Rules for the night shift: you are allowed a 7-minute grace period. No exceptions. If a hooded figure knocks at the drive-thru window, do not answer it. Stay out of its direct line of sight and it will leave. If Stan claims that you forgot his pickles, offer him a free complimentary chocolate shake. If he refuses, lock yourself in the office and call Dave. No outside food or drink. If a blood-like substance begins seeping from under the grill, mop it up until it stops. No, it is not blood. An old woman in a shawl will come in exactly 10 minutes past 1. Avoid looking at her for too long. She will not leave until you ask her where Tony is. If a small child appears telling you he lost his mother, ignore him. He does not have good intentions. You are required to comply with the employee dress code. Speak to management if you need clarification on what is acceptable. If you are alone and you feel the undeniable sensation of being watched, lock yourself in the office immediately and wait for it to dissipate. The store closes at 2 a.m. Before you clock out, place 2 packages of raw burgers on the stove. Always leave the restaurant by 2:37 a.m. The Hamburglar doesn't like company. Failure to adhere to these rules will result in immediate termination. Do not hesitate to call Dave if you have any questions or concerns. Dave's phone number was hastily scrawled at the bottom of the page. I stared at the list, unsure of what to make of it. Was this some sort of cruel prank on the newbie? Maybe Gary was in on it. I resolved to wait and find out for myself, and I made my way back to the counter. Upon seeing me approach, Stan rapidly stood from his seat and sidled up to me. Can I help you with something? Yeah. You forgot my pickles. I mentally rolled my eyes. Gary hadn't been gone for 10 minutes and the fun was already ramping up. Look, I watched my coworker make those. I know he didn't dash, I began, before Rule 3 crept into my head. I'm sorry. I can offer you a free shake for the inconvenience? His 4 chins flapped as he fervently shook his head. No, I don't want any more food. There is another way you could make it up to me, though. A malicious grin inched across his face. A blanket of fear sent adrenaline bursting through my veins. I'm 16, sir. If you think that's not what I meant, you dumb broad. I want a refund. What? No, you already ate it all. Fine. If you won't give me my money back, I'll have to take it from you. The massive mound of flesh began waddling to meet me behind the counter. I fled to the back, praying he wouldn't catch me. I glanced behind me as I struggled to push open the absurdly heavy office door. Stan was barreling toward me, sending shelves of products crashing to the ground. My heart thumped against my ribcage so hard that it hurt. I had just managed to slip through the door and slam it shut when he reached it. Thud. He pounded his ape-like fists against the sturdy metal frame, shouting obscenities at me all the while. I'll get you, you little whore. You can't stay in there forever. He was right. I instantly ripped the yellowing piece of paper from the board and punched in Dave's number. He picked up after an agonizingly long minute of waiting. Hello? This had better be good. I value my beauty sleep. Dave, it's Stan. The free shake didn't work. I'm trapped in the office. Dave sighed. All right, put it on speaker and hold your phone up to the door so he can hear me. I obliged, clenching my cracked iPhone 7 with a vice grip and sticking it close to the rattling door. Stan? Stan, can you hear me? It's Dave. The room fell eerily silent. Oh yeah, what's up, Davey? Stan, are you harassing one of my employees again? I don't need to get Mrs. Barrett on the phone, do I? No, please. I'll behave, I swear. Please, just don't call her. His voice trembled as he spoke. I don't know. That's what you said the last time. I promise I'll never bother her again. Come on, Davey, show a little compassion. Dave took a moment to respond. All right. But I need you to go home and you need to apologize to Mrs. Blake for scaring her. Blair, I interjected, face-palming myself. Right. Apologize to Blair and I'll let you off the hook. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry, Blaze, so, can I take you up on that free shake? No, Stan. No free shake tonight. I need you to leave, Dave said, a stern finality in his statement. Without another word, Stan angrily tromped through the kitchen and out the front door. I didn't release my breath until I heard it shut behind him. Thanks, Dave. Anytime, kid. In my experience, threatening to call his mother is a decent deterrent for any overgrown man baby. I chuckled, sensing the tension disperse. I'm gonna get back to bed now. Good luck tonight. And with that, he abruptly hung up. I sat for a moment, controlling my breathing to steady my palpitating heart before returning to my duties. I trudged into the kitchen and begrudgingly got to work cleaning the mess of boxes and condiments that Stan had strewn throughout the area. I had just put the final ketchup bottle in its place when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure was standing at the drive-thru window. I immediately tensed up, every muscle in my body freezing in place. It glared at me, yellow glowing eyes piercing the darkness. It raised a gloved fist and knocked lightly on the thin glass. The sound freed me from my stupor. Rule 2. I dashed to the counter and crouched behind it, hugging my knees to my chest. Ice flooded my veins as the knocking grew louder. The window shook in its frame as the light knocks soon escalated to rapid pounding. I squeezed my eyes shut, terrified at the notion that the slim barrier to the outside world wouldn't hold. The constant noise assaulted my eardrums, crashing against them like thunder during a storm. The knocking crescendoed into a fever pitch of resounding slams. Just when I thought that I might lose my sanity, it stopped. I glanced up amid the unsettling silence I found myself in. It was gone, as if the entity had never appeared in the first place. I gradually stood and took my time getting my bearings. I hesitantly peeked around the corner at the drive-thru. Nothing. Not so much as a scratch on the glass. I glanced down at my phone. 12:15 a.m., less than 2 hours. I could handle it, right? I began sweeping like Gary was beginning to ask me to do before receiving his unfortunate news. I was thankful for a break in the action. I didn't know how much more I could take. I could take a lot more, as I came to find out. I work for a company that contains liminal spaces, the abandoned McDonald's. Some places exist outside of our reality. Strange dimensions are ruled by different beings incomprehensible to humans. Imagine these as intertwined threads within our fabric of reality where sometimes they may pierce in and spill over to a certain degree. I'm sure some of you would have heard of liminal spaces. Transitional settings, paused in time and hauntingly empty, evoking a feeling of hollowness and dread deep in your gut. Schools at night, long winding empty hallways, and large indoor playgrounds with dim lighting. These liminal spaces are sometimes the sites at which these rips, in reality, take place, allowing the outer dimensions to slip in. It's a subtle change at first, barely noticeable until these places transition into their madness. I work for an international company that monitors and, if necessary, seals these rips in reality. Oftentimes, we target abandoned places that don't receive any human contact or conscious thought, such as an abandoned office building or a long out-of-use underground train station. These places are at high risk of succumbing to the outer dimensions because they are forgotten and alienated, allowing the manifestation of extra-dimensional beings. Out of the many different departments and sectors in the company, I work in the on-site containment sector, where trained personnel are the last line of defense against an identified high-risk anomaly. I've been on the job for most of my life and just recently retired. Throughout my career, I've seen things from downright horrifying to utterly nonsensical, and it's weighed down on me. I'm sharing my experiences here as a record of my career and also as a way to lift some of the burdens of my experiences. As is fitting, I'm going to start with my very first encounter, the abandoned McDonald's in the middle of the Australian outback. I stared out the car window as the rust-red expanse of the desert passed by, occasionally interrupted by a muted low shrub. My partner Dan had both his hands on the wheel, scanning the sides of the road for our target. It was standard protocol to have 2 agents on a mission, with one of them a more experienced member if there is a newer member present. You're probably wondering why we don't send larger groups so we can properly handle the situation, but it runs the risk of greatly disturbing and destabilizing the anomaly. 2 people have been on multiple occasions found to be the ideal number, with most operations going successfully given that the agents don't make a big mistake. Dan was several years older than me and wasn't much of a talkative guy, so much of the road trip here was spent in agonizing silence. And by much of the road trip, I mean 3 hours. I had tried to turn on the radio at the 30-minute mark, but he had promptly whacked my hand away, saying that we needed to be alert. The guy was on edge even though we were miles away from the actual site. In another few minutes, we finally came to the site. An old abandoned McDonald's building that had last been used in the 60s, when this road was the sole path to a now long forgotten tourist town. Dan parked the car there, just on the side of the road, not even entering the parking lot of the building. It was a safe move and one I wouldn't have thought of, but again, this was my first ever mission. As usual, Dan stepped out of the car and scanned the area before instructing me to grab the backpacks and follow him to the restaurant. The backpacks were courtesy of LIM-SEC, packed with standard military-type survival gear and also some special items needed to work in liminal spaces and alternate dimensions. The air was dry and hot, searing my skin like I was a potato being cooked inside an oven. Stepping out of the car, the sun felt like it pierced my skin even more. Dan had already walked over into the parking lot and was now looking at the building as if it was about to explode at any point. When I came over, Dan grabbed his backpack and then immediately started to point out the absurdities in the building. The first one was obvious and unsettled me a little. The fluorescent lights inside the building were flickering. Keep in mind that this place had been disconnected from the power grid over 50 years ago. Just that fact alone made my heart beat a little faster with anticipation of the supernatural. The rest were rather subtle, the spaces being a little too narrow in the parking lot, the overflowing rubbish bin at the entrance, and the immaculate exterior. One could not have deduced that the restaurant was abandoned at first glance. "Let's get this done quick. I've got a bad feeling," Dan whispered and started to walk towards the glass doors. He pushed them open and let me in before placing a door stopper under the door to prevent it from closing us in the place. You might have imagined the doors creaking or all furniture inside the restaurant being caked in dust, but that was not the case. The interior was clean and typical of a standard McDonald's store, complete with red chairs and thin wooden tables. Then I started to notice more absurdities: the 2 drinks on a table in a corner, with their straws oriented towards the chairs as if a couple had been sitting there drinking them moments ago. And even worse, a pile of crumpled tissues arranged in a crude pyramid with a small Ronald McDonald clown figurine staring right at me on another table. Dan had already pulled out an anomaly detector, which measured particle and energy disturbance in the area. Think of it as a radiation detector, but for detecting faults in reality. It was beeping steadily, indicating that we had come to the right place. Not that it wasn't already obvious. The goal was to find the center of the anomaly, a 0 point at which the exact disturbance had occurred, and then seal the gap using our equipment. The process is usually simple for most places as long as the space isn't disturbed. As we cautiously surveyed the area, eyes on the detector to find that peak disturbance point, I started to hear a humming sound coming from behind the counter somewhere in the kitchen. I pointed it out to Dan, and he confirmed he heard it too, so we started to approach the kitchen. I gasped when I finally saw the source of the sound and the scene in front of me. Inside the kitchen on the counter was an old CRT TV playing static. Beyond the TV, the kitchen environment seamlessly merged with some sort of open-plan office, complete with cubicles and computers. As we walked closer to the TV, the anomaly detector started to beep like crazy. I could see the transition from kitchen to office much better now, and it was a very sharp transition. Like someone had sliced out part of an office and placed it there. Looking at where the tile suddenly gave way to the blue office carpet, there was a slight fuzziness, something that my eyes physically couldn't focus on. Dan stopped me just as I was about to walk over the transition and into the office space by abruptly grabbing my shoulder. "There's no need to go there. This TV is the source," he whispered as he set down his backpack on the counter and pulled out a pair of wire cutters. With it, he cut the cable to the TV that disappeared somewhere into the wall. As expected, the TV immediately turned off. An eerie silence set down upon us, weighing on our shoulders, and I had this instinctual feeling that cutting the cord was a mistake. I looked over at Dan and could tell he felt the same, although he was keeping it together, sticking to protocol, and now attaching our devices to the TV to neutralize it. 2 more minutes and then we'll wrap this up and take it out, he told me as he stuck on a device with a screen. In a way, it looked like an expensive bomb. I couldn't tell you how the technology worked. I still don't understand any of the scientific details about these anomalies or spaces. It was all going smoothly until the buzzing sound started up again, more intensely than before, and this time it wasn't from the TV. Dan snapped his head around trying to locate the source of the sound, but it seemed to be all around us. My stomach sunk as adrenaline coursed its way through my jittery legs. It was coming closer now, closing in on us, and suddenly from behind the counter it rose. The creature was made of static in a humanoid shape. Its whole body is a kaleidoscope of sizzling black and white shapes. I couldn't make out the edges of its body, and its movement made it seem like it was gliding through the air. With my heart in my throat, Dan grabbed my arm and screamed at me to move. With nowhere else to go, we ran into office space past the kitchen, running around the cubicles to hide from the monster. We did have some weapons on us, but they were superficial at dealing with this sort of stuff at best. It's like shooting at a T-Rex with a pistol instead of running away. "You go to the left, I'll go to the right. Keep an eye on your radio," Dan yelled quickly. I listened and took a turn left. The open office space seemed to expand forever, the cubicle layout forming a nonsensical maze with various turns and corners. Each cubicle was the same, a black monitor accompanied by a keyboard and mouse, with the keyboard upon closer inspection lacking any labels on the keys. There was a lack of personal items and no chairs were present at all. With the carpet leaving a wet smack as I took each step, I realized that I could no longer hear the static buzz of the entity that had been chasing us, and I slowed to a stop in the middle of the space somewhere amongst the endless cubicles. The feeling of isolation resonated in my gut as I looked around with the overhead lights flickering ever so slightly. The whole place smelled like ashes while simultaneously having a moist, musty smell like soil after rain. I now realized that Dan had most likely distracted the entity from me and led it with him. Both were still somewhere here. I pulled my radio out of my pocket, a small discreet black unit outfitted with a special receiver and transmitter, and flicked it on. Dan, can you copy? I called into the radio after this. I clipped the radio onto my belt and started to think about how I could navigate out of there. I still had my own MSEC backpack on me, so I wasn't completely cast away. However, the only issue with being this far into the anomaly was that it would change and morph around me, making navigation back nearly impossible. Still, I had an identical detector similar to Dan's that would guide me to an exit point. It might be in the same McDonald's that we came in from if I'm lucky, or it could be on the other side of the world. But that was another issue. I walked around aimlessly when I noticed the wall of darkness. It was present in the distance everywhere, surrounding me. It was like I was inside a video game and the render distance was set very low. And as I looked closer at it, it appeared to be coming closer. Very quickly. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that I needed to get the hell out of here with this black curtain consuming everything. The circle of black continued to close in on me as I desperately ran around the place trying to look for some sort of exit, some sort of discontinuity that I could exploit. Each cubicle offered no help like the one before it, and my hope was beginning to run out. That's when I came across the door. It stood in the middle of an open space between cubicles leading nowhere. It was made of wood and decorated by carved, flourishing patterns. It didn't seem to belong in the space, seeming more fit for a luxurious mansion. The rule was drilled into us during our training: do not open doors under any circumstances. But this was a different circumstance. The space was collapsing in on me with each passing second, the wall of black coming closer, and this door was my last resort. Logically, I knew that it would lead nowhere because there was nothing on the other side, but it was also my last hope. I put my hand on the handle, feeling its cold metallic touch, and turned carefully. The door swung open inwards, revealing some sort of classroom. I now had two options: stay here and potentially get erased from reality, or have a chance to escape from this dimension by going through the door. I thought briefly about Dan and wondered where he was, feeling a pang of guilt as I slipped through the door and closed it behind me. Everything in the classroom was slightly oversized. It was so subtle that if I wasn't actively looking for anything out of place, I wouldn't have noticed it. Ordinary rows of single tables and chairs neatly filled out the room, with a chalkboard at the front accompanied by a larger teacher's desk. Written on the chalkboard was a nonsensical phrase: all students must calculate the heat death of the universe. The handwriting was familiar and very neat, resembling a font I couldn't place. I started to walk to the front of the room after spotting an exit door. I had already broken the door rule once, so it didn't hurt to break it twice. I noticed a sickening effect as I walked on further. The whole room seemed to scale up in size simultaneously. It was as if my body was shrinking with each forward step. I froze as I noticed this and took 2 slow steps forward again. The whole room and everything within it grew larger proportionally. The desks were starting to reach my shoulders now, and the whole thing was extremely disorienting. Actively evolving spaces were a bad sign, as was drilled in my training, and I needed to get out of there, or getting back home would very quickly become the least of my concerns. I wasn't sure what to do, so I decided I would run quickly to get to the exit door I could see at the front of the room. I started to run, and the room grew larger at a dizzying speed. It messed with my perception of depth and balance, causing me to trip on myself and come crashing to the ground. The desks were now taller than me, and the exit door was double my size. The writing on the chalkboard had changed. Failure in this examination will result in the loss of the gallbladder. The words were deeply disturbing in their own right, despite barely making sense, and I started to feel like I was going to throw up. Crouched on the floor there, I spotted a hole to my right under a desk. When I say hole, I mean it. It was a circle of darkness. I had no idea where it led, but I had a deep feeling that I wasn't safe in this classroom. And when I started to hear heavy thundering footsteps approaching from somewhere behind me, I had no choice but to jump into that hole. Coming out of the hole was a weird transition. Imagine falling into something, but then somehow stepping out into another place. The whole orientation of up, down, left, and right seemed to flip as I fell through that hole. And yet, the transition was seamless, like blinking your eyes. I now found myself in some sort of theater. The proportions of size were, to my relief, correct. However, the place was dark, and after my eyes had adjusted to it, I could see the rough outlines of rows of chairs. The large screen displayed a single message in a similar font to the handwriting on the chalkboard. Walls breathed, but there was no air. I ignored it, walking around the place trying to find some sort of exit when I finally spotted another TV. It was propped up on a chair in the front row, almost identical to the one we had found at the McDonald's. It also played the same static. Recurring symbols were a strong indicator of exits and entrances. I felt extreme relief as I spotted the TV, but then my thoughts reached Dan. I had no idea where he was, and he hadn't responded on the radio. Just as I was pondering this, I saw a figure in the distance. Thoughts crossed my mind, from horrifying to pleasant. I pulled a small torch out of my pocket and turned it on to better see whatever the figure was. The light illuminated Dan's face, but it was all wrong. His eyes were a deep red and his cheeks were streaked with blood-red tears. He called out to me in a broken voice, like some of his vocal cords had been clawed out before collapsing on the floor. Help me! The hairs on the back of my neck were standing, and a cold sweat erupted all over my body. I had only met Dan a couple of days ago, but I still couldn't abandon him in this place. At the same time, this could just be a trick that the space was playing on me, luring me in like prey. I was torn between the two options at this point, and within a split second, I took a decision that I still rethink to this day. I abandoned Dan and rushed for the TV, running my hand across the screen. A flash of light blinded me as I found myself back at the abandoned McDonald's right in the kitchen. The same office space expanded in front of me. I also noticed that Dan had left his entire backpack on the counter. Picking up his backpack, I ran outside of the place and right into the car. The car seemed to have worn down under the heat of the sun, and when I started it up, I couldn't believe the date that was displayed on the dashboard. 1 week had passed in what I perceived as a few hours at most. Dan was nowhere to be found after the mission, and I was sent back for retraining and stayed away from on-site missions for quite some time. I sometimes wonder if I could have saved Dan's life. He must have had it extremely hard without his gadgets and backpack in that wild, unknown dimension. Regardless, I was soon back to doing on-site missions, and many went smoothly without a hitch. But across my long career, I've faced many situations and seen many things that have made me contemplate the nature of reality. The truth is that we live under false security, only protected by a thin wall from hostile exterior dimensions.